I shouldn't have answered that call. It happened in the quiet office one afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, checking the cleaning schedule for the following week. In front of the business management software screen, I noticed a discrepancy in the numbers and furrowed my brows slightly. That's when my phone vibrated. The name mother-in-law appeared on the screen. I hesitated for a moment. Lately, calls from my mother-in-law were mostly complaints, dissatisfaction, or indirect orders. Honestly, it made my chest tighten. But since it was the third call, I reflexively tapped the answer button. "Hello, Mother?" There was no reply. Instead, I heard background noises, the sound of a chair being pulled, the sound of a cup being placed. And then, "She's just so shameless, isn't she?" It was her voice, without a doubt. She only graduated high school, yet she goes around calling it her own company and acts all high and mighty with her cleaning business. If it weren't for my son, who would even bother with someone like her? I involuntarily held my breath. I wanted it to be a misunderstanding. Even though I wished that, her voice continued. "First impression services. What a joke. She doesn't even come close to our son." My father-in-law then joined in with his deep voice. "Yeah. Honestly, I've always thought she was just dragging our son down. We were way too lenient with that woman." The screen in front of me grew blurry. My heart pounded, and my vision wavered. She says thank you and all that, but in reality, she's just using him. She'll mess up eventually, just wait. I froze, still clutching my phone. Even if I wanted to speak, my throat felt blocked. My mother-in-law's voice continued. "And that girl's background isn't impressive either. It's not like she's actually cleaning with her own hands. She's just lending her name to the business." My father-in-law scoffed through his nose. "If our son hadn't married that woman, we could have lived so much more peacefully." My head started to throb deep inside. My ears burned, but my hands and feet were ice cold. Even so, I couldn't hang up. It wasn't a phone call anymore. It felt like the truth I never knew was being forced upon me. Well, if she knows her place and quietly supports him, that's fine. But lately, she's been getting a bit too full of herself. That kind of thing always causes trouble later on. Exactly. She should be grateful to be living off our son's money. The conversation on the other end completely looked down on me. They never said my name, but I didn't need them to. I knew exactly who they were talking about. And that's what hurt the most. Everything I'd done hadn't meant anything. I thought I'd been quietly supporting the family. I didn't want anything in return, but they've seen me as nothing but a nuisance. Tears welled up unexpectedly. I didn't even know if it was out of frustration, emptiness, or sadness. But there was one thing I did understand. They had always looked down on me. The moment I realized that, a chill ran down my spine. And I felt something deep within me start to crack and collapse. I think that was the moment I began to change. After hanging up, I couldn't move for a while. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was something colder, heavier, that quietly sank deep into my chest. I stood up, made coffee without even thinking, and returned to my desk. I opened my laptop and clicked on a folder. First Impression Services, that was the name of the cleaning company I ran. A few years ago, I had also started a real estate management and investment company through a subsidiary. The mortgage that my mother-in-law and father-in-law believed they were paying to the bank was, in fact, paid by me through my company. It all began 6 years ago. At the time, my husband's family home had been missing mortgage payments repeatedly, and the bank had sent an official foreclosure warning through the court. My in-laws panicked, but my father-in-law, too proud to ask for help, insisted, "I'd rather die than rely on my son or his wife." But my husband was desperate. "Listen, you're the only one I can ask. At this rate, my parents' house will really be taken away. You don't have to tell them anything, just help cover the loan temporarily. When he said that, I hesitated. But when I looked into his eyes, I nodded. Because I believed this was what it meant to protect family. Under the name of my company, First Impression Services, I bought out the entirety of my in-laws' mortgage. On the surface, it looked as if the loan payments had simply been transferred from the bank to another financial institution. To this day, my in-laws still think they are transferring money to the bank each month, just as the payment slips indicate. But in reality, the invoices come from my company, and the money goes directly into an account I manage. Legally, the house now belongs entirely to me. Of course, the initial promise was that it would be just a few months of temporary help. But reality turned out differently. My husband had said, "I'll repay it once things settle down," but in the 6 years since, he never brought it up again. The same went for my in-laws. Somehow, in their minds, it had turned into something that never happened. They continued to live in that house, completely unaware of what I had done and what I was carrying. And today, they called me a high school graduate failure. I looked at my laptop and let out a small laugh. It was a laugh of disbelief, but also cold in some way. Ignorance really is bliss. Every month, I had been taking thousands of dollars out of my own pocket to protect their home. Not once had they said thank you. I didn't even expect them to. But at the very least, they had no right to mock me. The roof over their heads was something I had provided. Without even knowing they had been helped, I had quietly supported their lives from the shadows. And yet, they called me a failure. Don't be ridiculous. I muttered the words out loud. Those words became the switch that triggered the next chapter of my actions. Until now, I had endured it all because they were family. But I wasn't going to use that word as an excuse anymore. Calmly, I opened up more folders. Contracts, property records, payment statements, everything was there. That house was mine. Just imagining the look on their faces, it lit a small, warm flame deep in my chest. That night, I sat on the living room sofa, holding my phone. My husband's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated, but in the end, I wanted to talk to him. What I had heard on that phone call was beyond something I could simply put up with. At the very least, I had hoped my husband would still be on my side. That's what I believed. The call rang a few times before he picked up. "Hello? What's up?" His voice was a little tired. But there was still a note of kindness in it. I hesitated for a moment. Then, after a deep breath, I carefully chose my words. "Today, I got a call from your mom. It seemed like it was by mistake, and when I answered, the call stayed connected." And then, I could hear your parents talking. I felt him stop breathing for a moment. What were they saying? They called me a high school graduate failure. And they said, "There's no way a woman like her is worthy of our son." I tried to speak as calmly as possible, so my emotions wouldn't spill out. I was carefully listening to my own voice, making sure it wasn't trembling. After a moment of silence, he let out a slight, awkward chuckle and said, "Well, you know how they've always talked like that." "What?" "Don't let it bother you. They're just old people complaining. They don't mean anything by it." I was speechless. Complaining? No meaning? But if you had heard it, you'd know. They meant every word. They said I'll eventually mess up. That my cleaning business is just for show. That you'd all be happier without me. I felt the emotions I had been holding back burst forth like a broken dam. But his response was more indifferent than I expected. Maybe it's just their way of showing concern. They're probably anxious, about getting older, about our future. I was stunned. I never imagined the gap between us was this wide. "You know how I've supported them all this time, right? You know what it took for me to do that. Of course. But that's a separate thing, isn't it? My parents aren't trying to hurt you or anything. At that moment, something inside me quietly ended. He had chosen to protect them, as parents. I was not there, as a wife, or even as an ally. Maybe, deep down, I had already known that. But I just didn't want to admit it. Staring at my phone, I gave a small nod. I see. Thanks. That's enough. Wait, no, that's not what I meant. I'm going to bed. Good night. After ending the call, my heart was strangely calm. What spread inside me wasn't anger or sorrow. It was something deeper, a kind of resolve. For 6 years, I had protected that house, supported his parents without a word. Because I trusted my husband. Because I believed he truly cared for me. But the reality was different. No matter how much I gave to his parents, I was just an outsider. And maybe to him, I was just someone convenient. I stood up quietly and headed for the bedroom. My steps were surprisingly light. It's over. Saying the words out loud brought a strange sense of relief to my chest. That was the moment the word divorce clearly took shape in my mind. The next morning, the moment I woke up, I had already begun to take action. There was no more hesitation. It was time for me to face the reality I had been avoiding. I opened the laptop on my desk and, staring at the screen, tapped one contact. Michael Smith, my financial advisor. He had been with me since the founding of First Impression Services, a reliable person with a strong legal background. After a few rings, his voice came through the speaker. Joanna. What's going on? Kind of an unusual time. Sorry. I have something urgent I need to confirm. Of course. Tell me anything. I got straight to the point. The contract from 6 years ago, the one where we bought out the mortgage on my in-laws' house. Property number 12. The clause about immediate transfer of ownership in case of default, is that still valid? Michael paused for a moment, then answered in a low, firm tone. Absolutely. I pushed for that clause myself. The moment they fail to pay, First Impression Services would legally acquire full ownership. It's not optional, it's immediate. I see. Thanks. That's a relief. I exhaled quietly. By the way, what's their current payment status? Funny you ask. I've been thinking about that myself. Actually, they've been behind for the past 6 months. The deadline this month is the 15th, but the balance was cutting it close. What's the current remaining amount? As of yesterday, the balance was around $1,200. The next payment due is $2,800. Realistically, they won't make it. I nodded silently. So if they don't pay by the 15th, the property becomes ours completely, just like the contract says. Exactly. Unless they pay over $350,000 in one lump sum, there's no way to reverse the agreement. You'll officially become the legal owner. Michael's voice was calm. But to me, every word felt like another piece of armor fastening into place. And I paused for a moment before continuing. What's the chance they'll try to fight back? Michael thought for a second, then replied. If they actually understood the contract, they wouldn't have a leg to stand on. But they might lash out, complain to the company, try to damage your reputation. That kind of thing is definitely possible. Yeah. I think they're going to try that. Don't worry. Everything is backed by the contract and solid proof. Legally, you'll win 100%. If anything happens, I'll take care of it right away. His words allowed me to finally relax, just a little. Thank you. You've really been a big help. After ending the call, I opened a folder on my laptop screen. Inside were all the documents related to my in-laws' house. The purchase contract. The title deed. The payment records. Email exchanges with attorneys. Every one of them was proof of the effort I had made. I'm not just some daughter-in-law. I'm the owner. When I said it out loud, I was surprised by how natural it sounded. The words high school graduate failure that my mother-in-law had once said echoed in my mind. But to me now, that wasn't an evaluation. It was just an ignorant person's self-introduction. I would not let someone else's judgment define my worth. I was standing on my own 2 feet. That's why I had to make them realize exactly where they stood. There were 4 days left until the mortgage deadline. My in-laws were probably still living their lives as usual, unaware of what was approaching. But I wasn't their insurance policy anymore. From now on, I will move by my rules. With that resolution, I quietly closed the screen. That afternoon, a message arrived on my phone. How about dinner on Sunday? It'd be nice to see you again. The sender was my mother-in-law. Normally, her messages were brief, like business memos. But this one had an oddly gentle tone. And it'd be nice? I couldn't remember the last time she'd said something like that. Reading the message a few times over, I thought to myself, here it comes. Only 2 days left until the mortgage payment deadline. Even if they didn't say it out loud, it was obvious they were struggling financially. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I waited until the next morning and simply wrote, "I'll come," with a blank expression. Sunday. As evening came, I slowly drove toward my in-laws' house. No, toward the house I own. As I approached the front door, it opened suddenly, and my mother-in-law appeared with a smile. "Oh my. You came. I'm so happy." That smile made a chill run down my spine. Just days ago, those same lips had called me a failure, and now they smiled as if she had loved me all along. I returned the gesture with a forced smile. It's been a while. Inside, the table was filled with roasted chicken smelling of garlic, wine, salad, bread. A much more extravagant spread than usual. "I worked hard on all your favorite dishes today," she said. My father-in-law folded his newspaper, looked at me, and smiled warmly. "Oh, you're looking well. That's good to see." My mother-in-law handed me a glass of wine. I barely touched it, and hardly ate anything. My stomach couldn't move in this carefully staged warmth. Once the meal had settled a bit, my mother-in-law opened her mouth as if she had been waiting for the right moment. "Joanna, there's something I wanted to ask you about." Here it comes, I thought to myself. Yes, what is it? Well, this month's mortgage payment is a little tight. Do you think you could help us out? Just a little. Without moving a muscle, I tilted my head slightly. How much are we talking about? Her eyes darted for a second, and she glanced toward her husband. Including this month's payment, about $1,000. Would really help us a lot. She spoke softly, but I could hear it, that subtle tone that made it sound like help was just naturally expected. Help you out, huh? Do you even know whose house you're living in? I swallowed the words and smiled. That sounds difficult. Prices have gone up lately, haven't they? My mother-in-law looked at me with anticipation. My father-in-law crossed his arms, as if waiting for what I would say next. But I said nothing more. I simply took a quiet sip of wine. The air grew heavier with each passing moment. Then, my father-in-law spoke. "You're running a business, aren't you? Our son says it's going well. Thanks to everyone's support, it's doing okay. Then you should have a little room to support the family, right?" His eyes grew sharper. That distinct tone that pressed obligation and guilt onto you at the same time. You became part of this family. It's only natural to help with the house, don't you think? Inside, I laughed. Became part of it? No. I bought it. But I kept that line tucked away for now. I took a breath and smiled. I'll think about it. My mother-in-law let out a sigh of relief. Really? Thank you, she said. But her voice only sounded like she was satisfied the plan was working. I stood up. When she offered to help clean up, I replied, no need. Just leave it, and headed for the door. The moment I stepped outside, the cold night air brushed against my cheek. And strangely, I felt a quiet flame begin to flicker deep in my heart. That lukewarm performance, that night would be the last time I played along with them. On the morning of the 15th, I looked at my phone and let out a deep breath. A screenshot of the bank account. The payment deadline was midnight. And there had been no deposit from them. I opened my laptop and logged into the management system for first impression services. Property number 12, the house my in-laws lived in, the one I had bought 6 years ago, was now officially in default. Its ownership had fully transferred to my company. I opened a folder and printed out the prepared notice. Subject: eviction notice due to contract breach. Reason: non-payment per mortgage agreement. Grace period: vacate within 60 days. With trembling fingers, I signed the paper and sealed it in an envelope to be mailed. That was my answer to 6 years' worth of quiet endurance. A little after 2 p.m., my phone vibrated. A call from my mother-in-law. I intentionally ignored the first 2 calls. On the third, I finally picked up. Hello, this is Joanna. Her voice, on the other end, held no trace of her usual elegance. It was laced with panic. Hey, what's going on? We got a strange letter this morning. An eviction notice. This must be some kind of mistake, right? It's not a mistake, Mother. I replied quietly, but clearly. Since you have defaulted on the mortgage payments, First Impression Services has officially obtained full ownership of the property. From now on, you will need to enter into a monthly rental agreement. Or vacate the property within 60 days. For a moment, everything on the other side of the line went still. Then came my father-in-law's roar. Don't be ridiculous. Do you even know what you're saying? That's our house. You were the only ones who thought so. I stared at my computer screen as I spoke. I bought that house 6 years ago. The house you've been living in has legally been mine for a long time. My mother-in-law's voice came through, hoarse. That's not true. We've been paying the bank all this time. My company has been the one that paid the loan to that bank. The recipient of your payments has been First Impression Services from the start. You really didn't know? I was laughing inside. Not because they didn't know, but because they had looked down on me while being that ignorant. It was almost satisfying. You did all this behind our backs. Yes, I did. But for 6 years, without complaint, I protected that house. During all that time, not once did either of you say thank you. Silence. All I could hear were shaky, angry breaths from the other side. A mix of confusion, panic, and rage. Then my father-in-law growled in a low voice. This won't end like this. If you're going to pull something like this, we've got our own ideas. Such as, I'll file complaints with your company. I'll expose everything about your past. You must have faked all kinds of things, right? Once the public knows, you won't be able to keep your business running. There it was. The threat. But I didn't feel anything anymore. Is that so? Feel free. We have all the records and contracts ready. And if it comes to a defamation lawsuit, you'll be the ones paying the price. As soon as I finished speaking, his curses cut off mid-word. The call ended abruptly. I placed my phone on the table and leaned back into the chair. It was quiet. And that silence felt strangely comforting. All the fear and anxiety I used to carry, now it was gone, like mist after the sun breaks through. Maybe this really was a battle. One to prove who I was, and where I stood. Until now, I had tried to act like the good daughter-in-law. I tried not to upset my in-laws. Tried not to embarrass my husband. Tried to shrink myself to fit in. But that was over. I had only used what I had rightfully obtained through my own efforts. And yet, the feeling of liberation was overwhelming. Staring at the words property no. 12, full ownership transferred displayed on my computer screen, I murmured softly. Finally, it's truly my house now. The next morning, when I arrived at the office, Nola, my boss, approached me with an uneasy expression. Joanna, do you have a minute to talk? I had a bad feeling. She took me into a conference room and showed me an email on her laptop screen. Employee Joanna K. has committed fraudulent financial acts against her family. We were threatened and had our home taken from us. The sender was anonymous, but the tone and writing style made it immediately clear it was from my mother-in-law. Nola spoke quietly. As a company, we do have to look into the facts. But personal family matters won't affect your position or performance reviews. I explained the situation briefly. The agreement from 6 years ago. The mortgage buyout. The eviction notice. Nola listened carefully to every word. Then she spoke clearly. Don't worry. You followed proper procedures and have all the documentation. We have no reason to doubt you. I felt a weight lift off my chest. After returning home, I contacted my husband, or rather, the man who would soon be my ex-husband. Your mother submitted a false report to my company. Did you know that? He paused for a moment, then said, I tried to stop her, but they don't listen to me anymore. Whose side are you on? I don't even know what's right anymore. I just don't want things to get messy. The moment I heard those words, it felt like I let go of something completely. I see. Then let's proceed with the divorce as planned. Okay. After ending the call, my heart was surprisingly calm. I had made it this far without relying on anyone. And from now on, I will continue to protect my life with my own hands. Midweek, a loud knock echoed at the door. With a clack, I opened it. Standing there were my in-laws. My mother-in-law's eyes were red and swollen. My father-in-law stood with arms crossed, glaring at me. Joanna. Please. Isn't there some way to fix this? Her voice trembled. I stood silently in the doorway. 60 days to move out. That's too cruel. My father-in-law spoke in a low voice. I only acted according to the contract. But we're family, aren't we? We've been through so much together. At the word family, I responded quietly. For 6 years, I supported this home in silence. But behind my back, you called me a failure, used me, and even tried to destroy my company in the end. My mother-in-law turned her face away. My father-in-law was at a loss for words. I don't want revenge. I've just lost any reason to keep supporting you. For a moment, it felt like the air froze. You're a cold woman. My father-in-law spat the words. I smiled at them. You were the ones who turned cold first. My mother-in-law spoke again. Then, is there any way we can stay? If we pay rent. If you're willing to pay, you'll need to sign a formal rental contract. But that includes a background check. You'll also need a guarantor. I could hear my father-in-law grinding his teeth. Don't be ridiculous. Are you trying to destroy this family? I looked him straight in the eyes. You're the ones who destroyed it. There was nothing more to say. I placed my hand on the door and slowly closed it without a word. In that moment, I finally felt truly free. The day before the eviction deadline, I received a call from Michael Smith. They moved out today. Returned the keys, too. The property is officially vacant. I looked at my phone and let out a long breath. 60 days had passed since I issued the formal notice of eviction. The calls and messages from my in-laws stopped completely after the first week. I had expected them to try something, some move, some retaliation. But in the end, they just left quietly. I didn't feel like going to the property. Still, a few days later, I found myself driving past it on my way home from work. The house that I knew so well stood there, yet somehow looked like something entirely different. The windows were bare. Weeds had grown wild in the yard. I was strangely struck by how quickly a house without people could change the very air around it. I didn't stop the car. I just drove by, quietly. I felt no attachment. No guilt. What I had done to get here wasn't something to boast about. But it was something I could be proud of. The divorce with my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, was already in motion. There were no arguments. No demands for compensation. It felt like a relationship that ended because it was meant to. After that, I threw myself even more into work. I began preparations to open another branch of the cleaning business. Corporate contracts were increasing, too. I moved forward on my own, without relying on anyone. But it didn't feel like loneliness. I had become the owner of my own life. For the first time, I understood what it meant to feel lighthearted. Sometime later, a message arrived on my phone. "Please. Can we talk? I don't know where to go anymore." It was from my mother-in-law. I read the short message over and over again. In the past, I might have felt uneasy. I might have agonized over whether to reply. But not now. Without the slightest hesitation, I deleted the message. Because I had already decided never to look back. Soon after, I sold the house, property number 12. I listed it slightly below market value, and it sold within days. Looking at the profit in my account, a thought came to me. Could I use this to help someone restart their life? With that thought, I created a small foundation. A support system for women being financially exploited by family or spouses. I called it the Home, hoping for my escape fund. I wanted to help those who, like me, were trapped by the word family and had nowhere to run. Now I understand, having a safe place is far more important than any blood tie. After leaving that house, I finally felt like I had found a place that belonged to me. Family isn't something formed by shared blood. True family are the people who don't deny your worth. The ones who support you when you try to stand back up, without getting in your way. And above all, you must become your own greatest ally. I don't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. I don't need anyone's approval. I can finally say to myself, with confidence, that I've done more than enough. And that's why, now, I can say this. I've finally found what true family means. That family was myself. Several years later, an unexpected reunion led to a new connection that brought fresh color into my life. He was a man I happened to meet at a cleaning industry expo. His booth was right next to mine. Like me, he had struggled to build his business from the ground up. At first, we only exchanged light conversation. But after running into each other several times, I gradually began to trust him. I was able to speak openly about the things I had gone through. He never judged me. He simply said, quietly, "That's amazing." Those words felt like they saved me. And eventually, we got married. It wasn't a grand ceremony. But the vows we exchanged, hand in hand, were a promise of a future that would not be defeated by the past. A year later, a small life began to grow between us. As I felt the gentle kicks from inside my belly, tears welled up in my eyes. Back then, I believed no one needed me. But now, I genuinely wanted to protect someone. At night, as I watched our baby sleeping, I gently held their hand. The warmth of that tiny hand slowly melted away the pain of the past. I will never have my home taken from me again. No one will ever deny my heart again. Here, there is love. Not bound by blood, but built through trust and care. This is a real family. A family I chose. A future I nurtured. Yes. I have finally found the place I truly belong.